It was a cold morning in late autumn. The air was sharp and dry, and the wind carried a chill that seemed to go straight through a person's bones. Along a long stretch of road just outside a small town, a woman stood with her 3 children. She wrapped her thin jacket tightly around her body, trying to block out the cold. The oldest of her children, a boy of about 10 years old, was standing beside her, holding his little sister's hand. The youngest child, no more than 4, was in her arms, his cheeks pink from the cold air. They had been walking since early morning. Their shoes were dusty, their steps slow. The road was quiet, with only the sound of the wind moving through the tall, dry grass. A truck had passed an hour ago, but no one had stopped. They were tired, hungry, and unsure of where to go next. The woman's name was Anna. For months, life had not been easy for her. Once she had a small home and steady work in town, but things had changed quickly. When the factory where she worked shut down, she lost her job. Then one problem after another came. Rent was hard to pay, bills kept growing, and there was no one she could turn to for help. She tried everything she could. She cleaned houses, she washed dishes at a small diner, she even worked late nights to keep her children warm and fed. But it wasn't enough. Slowly, piece by piece, she lost everything. Still, she refused to give up. Her children were her world, and as long as she had them, she told herself she would keep going. That morning, as the wind blew hard across the open fields, she whispered quietly to them, "It's going to be okay. We'll find something. We always do." Her voice was soft but steady. Her son looked up at her, tired but trusting. He had learned to believe his mother even when everything else seemed uncertain. The little girl held onto his arm tightly. She didn't fully understand what was happening, only that they didn't have a warm bed anymore, and they were always moving. Far down the road, a sound began to rise, the deep rumble of a truck engine. Anna turned her head and saw a large pickup truck coming toward them from the distance. It was dark green, old but strong-looking, like something that had seen many years on the road. The truck slowed as it got closer. Inside sat a man. His name was Thomas, but most people in town called him Mr. Grant. He was a tall man with broad shoulders and hands rough from years of work on his ranch. He had been driving to town to pick up supplies for his ranch, where he raised cattle and grew hay. He liked quiet mornings like this, just him, the road, and the sound of the engine. But this morning, something caught his eye. On the side of the road, he saw the woman and her 3 children. He noticed the way the wind pulled at their clothes, the way the children held on to each other, and the look on the woman's face, tired, worried, but still standing tall. He had passed people in need before. He had donated food to the town's shelter many times, but something about this moment was different. Something told him to stop. He slowed his truck and pulled over to the side of the road. The engine hummed softly as the truck came to a stop. Anna froze for a moment. She wasn't sure what to expect. Sometimes people stopped just to stare. Sometimes they asked questions she didn't want to answer. And sometimes they just drove away again. She held her children close, ready for anything but hoping for kindness. The man stepped out of the truck. His boots crunched against the gravel. He wore a thick jacket and a cowboy hat that shaded his face. He walked slowly toward her, not wanting to scare the children. For a long second, they just looked at each other. He saw how small her hands looked against the worn blanket wrapped around her little boy. She saw the calm, steady way he moved, like someone used to hard work but not unkind. Then he spoke. His voice was deep but gentle, like someone who didn't waste words. "Get in my wagon now," he said. Anna blinked. At first, she didn't understand. She had expected a question, maybe a lecture or a piece of advice she didn't need. But the man's words were simple. He wasn't asking where she came from. He wasn't asking why she was there. He was just telling her to get in. Her oldest son looked up at her with wide eyes, waiting to see what she would do. Her little girl squeezed her hand tighter. Thomas saw the fear in their eyes, and he softened his tone. "It's cold," he said. "I've got heat in the truck." "You don't have to tell me anything. Just get in. It's better than standing out here." For a moment, Anna hesitated. Trust was not easy for her anymore. She had learned the hard way that not everyone meant well. But she also saw something honest in his face. His voice didn't carry judgment. He wasn't trying to look like a hero. He just sounded like someone who meant what he said. She took a slow breath. Then, carefully, she lifted her youngest child and opened the passenger door of the truck. Thomas stepped back, letting her take her time. One by one, the children climbed into the truck. The warmth inside hit them immediately, making their faces relax just a little. Anna slid into the seat and shut the door gently. Thomas walked around to the driver's side, got in, and started the engine again. The heater blew warm air across the cabin. The little boy stared out the window. The little girl rested her head on her mother's shoulder, and the youngest curled into her lap like a small bird finding a nest. They didn't talk much at first. Thomas wasn't the kind of man who filled silence with chatter. He let the road speak for itself. Anna sat quietly, feeling the warmth soak into her bones. For the first time in a long time, she felt her hands start to relax. As they drove, Thomas glanced at the children through the corner of his eye. He noticed their thin jackets and how tightly they clung to their mother. He thought about his own life, the house on the hill, the fire in the living room, the extra rooms no one had used in years. He had built everything with his own 2 hands, but for a long time it had only been him living there. He cleared his throat. "Where were you headed?" he asked softly. Anna hesitated. "Anywhere," she said quietly. "Just somewhere warm. Somewhere safe." He nodded slowly. He didn't press for more. That was enough for him to understand. As the truck turned off the main road and onto a long dirt path that led toward his ranch, Anna's heart began to race. She didn't know this man. She didn't know where they were going. But she could feel that he wasn't leading them into danger. His hands on the steering wheel were steady, his expression calm. The sun climbed a little higher, shining weakly through the cloudy sky. The fields stretched out on both sides, wide open and quiet. The road curved gently toward a large wooden gate with a metal arch overhead. Beyond it, there were acres of land, a big ranch house, a barn, and animals grazing in the distance. Anna had seen this ranch before, from the highway. People in town talked about it. It belonged to one of the wealthiest ranchers in the area. She had never imagined she would be sitting in his truck. As they drove up the long driveway, farm workers stopped what they were doing to watch. They weren't used to seeing strangers arrive with Mr. Grant. He rarely brought anyone home with him. He lived a quiet, private life, and that made the sight of this woman and her 3 children even more surprising. Thomas parked the truck in front of the house. The door creaked as he opened it and stepped out. He walked around to the passenger side and opened the door for Anna. She held her children close as they climbed down, their shoes crunching on the gravel driveway. The house in front of them looked warm and solid, with smoke rising gently from the chimney. It smelled faintly of wood and hay. Thomas spoke again, his voice simple and calm. "You can come inside," he said. "There's food and heat. You don't owe me anything. Just come in." Anna didn't know what to say. No one had spoken to her like that in a long time, without asking for anything in return. She felt a lump in her throat, but she pushed it down and nodded. The little girl grabbed her hand and tugged gently toward the front steps. The oldest boy followed close behind, carrying the small bag that held the last of their belongings. When they stepped inside, warm air wrapped around them like a soft blanket. The house smelled like fresh bread and wood smoke. A big stone fireplace glowed with orange light. For the first time in weeks, the children's faces began to relax. Thomas didn't ask them 1,000 questions. He didn't look at them like they were a problem to be solved. He just said, "You can sit here by the fire. I'll make some hot cocoa." The words seemed so ordinary, but to Anna, they felt extraordinary. The children sat down near the fireplace, their hands stretched toward the warmth. Their cheeks began to glow as the color returned to their faces. Thomas went into the kitchen, where the sound of a kettle filled the air. Anna sat quietly on the couch, unsure of what to say or do. She wasn't used to kindness that came without strings. She watched him move around the kitchen, calm and steady, like this wasn't anything special. To him, it wasn't a grand gesture. It was just the right thing to do. But to her, it felt like a door opening in a world that had been nothing but walls. When he returned with steaming mugs, the children reached out with grateful hands. They sipped carefully, and their eyes lit up at the sweetness. For a long while, no one spoke. The only sound was the crackle of the fire, but something quiet and powerful began to build in that silence. Trust. Not the loud, quick kind. The slow, steady kind that grows when someone shows they care without expecting anything back. Anna looked at her children and then at the man sitting across from them. She didn't know what tomorrow was. The morning light shone softly through the windows of the ranch house. For the first time in many nights, Anna woke up somewhere warm. She opened her eyes slowly, blinking at the sunlight falling across the wooden floor. It felt strange at first. No cold air biting at her skin, no sounds of wind howling outside. Instead, there was silence. A calm, peaceful silence that wrapped around the room like a soft blanket. She turned her head and saw her 3 children still sleeping on the large couch near the fireplace. Their faces looked different now, no longer tight with cold or worry. They looked peaceful, like children should. Their little hands were still tucked under the blankets Thomas had given them the night before. For a long moment, Anna just sat there watching them. She didn't move. She wanted to remember this feeling. It had been so long since she had seen her children sleep without shivering. In the kitchen, Thomas was already awake. He had lived his whole life waking up before the sun. He moved quietly, making coffee and warming milk in a pot for the children. It wasn't something he thought much about. To him, it was just another morning, but with company this time. When Anna heard the sound of dishes and the smell of warm bread, she sat up slowly. Her heart still carried the weight of the road behind them, but something inside her had shifted. Thomas looked up when she walked in, still wrapped in one of the thick blankets. "Morning," he said simply. She nodded shyly. "Morning," she replied. He handed her a mug of warm coffee. She hesitated for a second before taking it. The warmth of the cup spread through her cold fingers. It was just coffee, but to her it felt like kindness. The children woke up slowly one by one, drawn by the smell of warm food. The youngest one ran to the kitchen table with sleepy eyes, while the little girl climbed onto a chair carefully, still clutching the corner of her blanket. The oldest boy made sure they were settled before sitting down himself. Thomas placed plates of scrambled eggs and bread in front of them. It wasn't anything fancy, but to the children, it felt like a feast. They ate quietly at first, still unsure if it was real. But soon, soft smiles began to appear on their faces. As they ate, Thomas leaned against the counter, sipping his own coffee. He wasn't a man of many words, and he didn't try to make big speeches. He just let them be. After breakfast, he put on his jacket and hat. "I've got chores to do outside," he said. "You all can stay in here and rest. The fire will keep the house warm." Anna looked up. "Thank you," she said softly. She meant it more than he could ever know. He nodded, then stepped outside, the door closing gently behind him. Through the window, Anna watched him walk toward the barn. The morning sun was rising slowly, shining across the wide open fields. Horses moved in the distance and cows gathered near the fence. Workers were already there, moving hay, fixing fences, and talking quietly to each other. Anna wasn't used to watching someone else work while she rested. Her life had always been filled with movement, with worry, with finding ways to survive. But now, for this moment, she didn't have to run anywhere. Her children spent the morning playing quietly near the fireplace. They found a basket of old wooden toys in the corner. Toys Thomas had kept from long ago, even though his own children had grown and moved away. He hadn't touched that basket in years. But now, it felt right to have it out. When Thomas returned from the barn around midday, his boots dusty and his hands rough from work, he found the children sitting on the floor, laughing softly as they built towers with wooden blocks. The sound of their laughter filled the room like sunlight. For a brief second, something warm moved through his chest. It had been a long time since his house had been filled with that kind of sound. For many years, it had been quiet, too quiet. He walked past them and washed his hands at the sink. "Looks like you're feeling better," he said, a small smile touching his face. Anna smiled too, though hers was shy. "They haven't laughed like that in a long time," she admitted. Thomas didn't say anything right away. He just nodded. But inside, he felt something shift. As the days passed, the family began to settle into the rhythm of the ranch. Thomas didn't treat them like guests or strangers. He treated them like people who belonged there, even if just for a while. He showed the oldest boy how to feed the chickens and let the little girl help gather eggs. The youngest liked to follow him around the yard, holding his hand when they went to check on the horses. The children began to smile more each day. The fear in their eyes slowly melted away. They had a warm bed at night, hot meals, and a place where they felt safe. Anna helped around the house without being asked. She swept the floors, washed dishes, folded laundry, and cooked simple meals when she could. She didn't want to just receive kindness. She wanted to give something back. One afternoon, Thomas came back from the barn to find her hanging fresh sheets on the clothesline in the sun. The wind lifted her hair gently, and the children were playing in the grass nearby. It was such a simple moment, but it felt beautiful in its own quiet way. He remembered the first time he had seen them on the side of the road. They had looked like they had nothing left, but now, standing in the sunlight, they looked like a family finding their strength again. In the small town nearby, word began to spread. People were surprised. Thomas was known for being kind but quiet. He rarely let anyone new into his world. So when people heard he had taken in a woman and her 3 children, they talked. Some were curious. Some were doubtful. But many were moved. One by one, neighbors began to stop by. A woman from the town bakery brought a basket of fresh bread. A man from the hardware store came with warm coats for the children. Another neighbor dropped off blankets. No one asked questions. They just wanted to help. For Anna, it was overwhelming. She wasn't used to kindness without conditions. But every time someone handed her something with a smile, she felt a small piece of her heart heal. The children started to make friends with the neighbors, too. A family who lived a mile away had 2 children around the same age. They came to the ranch one weekend, and soon the yard was filled with the sound of laughter and little feet running through the grass. Thomas watched from the porch, his arms crossed loosely. His house, once silent and still, now felt alive. As weeks turned into months, Anna found work at a small diner in town. Thomas helped her get the job by introducing her to the owner, who respected him deeply. She worked part-time, and each day she came home a little stronger. The children went to the local school. On their first day, they were nervous, but Thomas drove them in his old truck, making sure they walked through those doors with their heads held high. Life wasn't suddenly perfect, but it was steady. And steady was something Anna had almost forgotten how to hope for. One evening after dinner, Thomas and Anna sat on the porch. The sky was painted with soft orange and pink colors as the sun set behind the hills. The children were chasing fireflies in the yard, their laughter floating in the air. Anna turned to him. "I don't know how to thank you," she said quietly. He looked at her with the same calm eyes he had on that cold morning when they met. "You don't have to," he replied. "Sometimes the right thing to do is just the right thing to do." She felt her throat tighten with emotion, but this time it wasn't from fear. It was from gratitude. The ranch had changed them, but it had also changed him. He had lived alone for many years after losing his family. He had buried himself in work, in silence, in the comfort of routine. But these children, with their shy smiles and bright laughter, had brought something back into his life, something warm and human. The town saw it too. People began to talk about how the quiet rancher had opened his home and his heart without asking for anything. It inspired others. The small town became kinder, a little softer, just because one man decided to act without overthinking. A year later, the family was still there, but their lives were different. Anna had saved enough to rent a small house nearby. She didn't want to be a burden to Thomas, but he never saw them that way. He told her, "You've got a home here, always." The children visited the ranch almost every weekend. They helped with the animals, played with the neighbors' kids, and sometimes stayed the night. The youngest, who used to cling to Anna's arms in fear, now ran across the fields with a bright smile. Thomas became like a grandfather figure to them, steady, strong, and always there when they needed someone. And sometimes, when Anna sat on the porch with a cup of coffee, watching the kids run across the fields, she would remember that one moment on a cold morning when a stranger stopped his truck, looked at her, and said, "Get in my wagon now." It was such a simple sentence, but it had opened a door to a whole new life. She often thought about how everything could have been different if he had just driven past them like everyone else. But he didn't. He stopped. And because he stopped, she and her children got a second chance. Thomas, too, found something he didn't know he had lost: the feeling of being part of a family again. On the anniversary of the day they met, Anna and the children made him a special dinner. The little girl handed him a small drawing she had made. It showed the truck, the road, and their family standing together in front of the ranch. At the bottom, in shaky handwriting, she had written, "Thank you for stopping." Thomas stared at the drawing for a long time. Then, in his quiet way, he said, "You don't need to thank me.